Our next guest on the panel is REQ. REQ is an artist and musician, and also, I mean, you have just redefined our street space and our landscapes, both in Brighton and in Hastings, where probably your most recognisable piece is on the side gable end of a big house in Queen's Road, just by Morrison Street. And it's a woman emerging from the sea. And even if you don't think you know it, next time you're down Queen's Road, you will see it and you will know exactly what it is. And it was REQ who produced it. And yeah, I've got a little mantra for you here. My concept is that art should always be beautiful.
That is right, yeah.
So, on to the questions.
Yeah, go on.
You get a lot of, quite frankly, difficult to understand criticism for your repeated focus on recreating your muse. Throughout the centuries, men have painted the female form. Why do you think it is being perceived as misogyny rather than idolisation? Or would you call it something else?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, that, because if somebody says misogyny, then that means that I hate all women, you know, including all of the women here, which clearly isn't the case. In fact, I don't think I would have spent 10 years painting something I disliked, just as when Vincent van Gogh painted sunflowers. It's not because he hated all the flowers that exist in the world. I just find it a bit ridiculous thing to say. So I'm not entirely sure, but this is maybe a symptom of doing things in the public eye, is that if people don't like them, they're going to maybe decide if they like it or not. And if they don't like it, there are narratives in place to use as a kind of weapon against that, I suppose. And so I just have to accept it.
And it's a long time to have been working on the same subject matter for 10 years. And you do paintings as well as street art paintings.
That's right, yeah.
But that's been your focus for 10 years. I'm curious to know what your focus was before and what made you make that change.
I started off as a graffiti artist. Well, I learnt to draw when I was younger, and then I went into graffiti when that first came over in the 80s. But I think I got to the end of graffiti. It didn't fulfil me anymore, I suppose. So I swapped the curves of the letters for a female form that felt to me more my real nature somehow, to be expressing something that for me was representative of love in general, good feeling. That's how I see it. But also music, so there's two sides, because obviously music is very abstract, whereas figurative art is obviously not as abstract. So there's a couple of different ways of playing that game.
And interesting that both you and Killa Kela do both those art forms consecutively, and they inform each other.
Yeah, I think I mastered spray paint, you could say, and it wasn't a massive leap then to start doing things with sound, actually, because you're using an inner sense of harmony. That's how I look at it. When you're painting, for instance, and then if you've got noise, sound and notes, you're also mixing and blending kind of colours. So it's got an equivalence.
Is there a kind of synesthesia going on there?
Not that I've identified.
No.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, but parallels, and yeah. I guess one of the art forms is a metaphor for the other, and it's a way that you can see your way into what you produce.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So we've said that you're famous around these parts for your Morrison's mural, as it's known, but you've been commissioned many times for Coastal Currents. What's your favourite piece that you've done
of mine?
Here? Yeah.
Well, I do really like the Smudge. My muse is called Smudge. She's coming out of the sea like that, and for me that was what I wanted to do. In fact, it was Tina originally that said she wanted a female presence, as in an image, a female image on the street there, and that was my speciality. So that for me really sort of shines in that area. And if you'd seen the looks on the faces of the people that lived there, and how elated they felt that somebody was actually giving them a little jewel in their street, you know, it really did what Tina wanted it to do, I think.
And how long ago is it that you painted that?
5 years.
Five years, brightening up Queen's Road. And it was a transformation. And Queen's Road is a really exciting road. I think people in Hastings tend to underestimate it, but it's an incredible street of independent shops, and it has been getting better and better, but definitely a landmark there. So thank you for that. How does working on public art compare to your other artistic practices?
When you're out painting in the street, you do get people coming up to you and talking to you, and then you can get work from that. So that is useful. So when I've got no money, for instance, I want to get some commissions going, I think that, you know, I'll just go out and do a street piece and see what happens. Working on your own, you know, you never know if a piece that you make, I make little paper pieces like this, so I don't know if they're going to go anywhere. They might not go into a gallery, they might just sit in my studio, you know.
It is quite interesting thinking about the street as literally being a billboard for your art as an artist, because I always have huge respect for street artists, because the amount of effort and time and money buying the materials to do those things, which they are a gift to a community. I mean, they may not be a commissioned gift, but they are an important part. And again, it's a temporary thing, isn't it? Some of them stay there for ages, and some of them are short-lived. But the fact that it can be of value to the artist as a way of getting other commissions is quite interesting. I've never thought of it that before. So Coastal Currents is all about placemaking and bringing the community together with accessible public arts. Tina would argue you personally would therefore have had a direct effect on civic pride, happiness, cohesiveness, and many other aspects of societal pride. Yet graph is still in the main derided until it crosses into pretty pictures. How do you feel about that dichotomy?
Graffiti. Well, graffiti isn't meant to be pretty, is it? It's just guys running around trying to make an alias famous. There's nothing else in it. It's not supposed to be aesthetic, so people don't like it. And most of the time you're doing it illegally. If you're just doing it, putting your name up simply as a tag, you haven't really got time to do anything good, and most of the time people can't read it, so they think it's just random scribble, kids going mad or something, you know. So there's nothing for them in that.
I find it really fascinating, the kind of difference between graphs and tagging and what we see now as street art and that relationship. And when a piece of street art goes up, unless it's disliked, it tends to be left alone. And I find that incredibly respectful. And I wonder about the people who are doing that tagging and whether it's a beginning to them becoming street artists and wanting to develop into something. Or do you think they're two very different communities?
Yeah, it's not like a kind of lineage of progress. They're two different games. One of them, graffiti, is more like an adrenaline sport, really, and a way for guys to sort of sort out their hierarchies, I suppose, but in a kind of semi-creative way. Street art, on the other hand, well, actually, there's a sort of weird, not rivalry, but graffiti guys hate street artists on the whole, because street artists get all the fame, they get the best walls, and they get paid, and they get all the Instagram followers or whatever, you know. So graffiti guys will cross out street art, but the other way around, street artists are more tolerant. And what I like maybe more is graffiti coming from that. It's a kind of boys' game, which for me is tedious. But street art, men and women do it equally. I think that's the best aspect of it. You turn a corner and you never know what colours it's going to be, if it's by a man or a woman, whether that matters or not, but you're just getting more variety.
And that leads on to my last question, which is, you do a spray paint school for girls in Brighton. And how does inspiring others, particularly young women, drive your work or make you feel fulfilled?
So I started using spray paint in 1984, and after 30 years of using spray paint, I thought I'd do something. So I started what I call Spray Paint Academy for Girls. It's not just girls, it's women in general, but I just liked the way it sounded, so I called it that. But generally, it's partly this thing of there being a difference between, you know, not much female presence painting on the streets, especially in Brighton where I live. So I thought I'd just kind of give some skills for free. I'd give the lessons are free. I'd just give some skills out and see what the streets, how the streets change.
So where do you do those?
Just in my backyard.
Okay.
Yeah, I use odds and ends of paint, when I do a commission for Tina, I just sort of bag a few cans.
Oh, the truth is out.
And I do the lessons in the backyard.
Yeah. Well, how great that you are using those coastal currents tools to encourage a new generation.
Yeah, but what happens then is if I get a big commission on, for instance, then I'll see who's around and who wants to be an apprentice on that job, up the scaffold or cherry picker or whatever it is, if it's a tool piece.
That's really interesting. I'd never thought about artists like you working with apprentices, which is like kind of a real historical way of working, isn't it?
That is actually more traditional in graffiti.
Okay.
You'd have a mentor and you'd have young kids coming up and you'd teach them letter forms and things like that and how to get in that particular bit into the train yard and not, get killed or whatever. Yeah, it's traditional.
Fantastic. So thank you so much, Rick. And as I say, there's an opportunity for questions from the floor later.